talking about reliability for these R107s, the number one issue is with the engine, and it's with the valve train of these V8 engines, and it's all years, 73 all the way up to 89. I call this the Achilles heel of these engines. The engines themselves are very robust. The bottom end can go a long time, but you need to pay attention to this valve train. You have issues with stretched chains, broken chains, oiler clips. The tube comes off the cam towers, upper guide rails that'll break and go in and jam the sprocket and throw the chain, and the pistons come up and hit the valves. I've seen this 3 or 4 times in my own shop where these have suffered catastrophic failure because this was not attended to, okay? This is very important. If you're thinking about getting one of these R107s, the very first thing you want to do, unless somebody else has demonstrated to you it's been done recently, is get the valve covers off the engine. So I'm going to get the valve covers off this 83 380 SL today. And some of you are thinking, well, Kent, you got that single row timing chain. I'm not going to go over that in this video. There's lots of information about the problem with the single row timing chain on the 1981 to 1983 380 SL. And you can just Google that. But this car got converted, and I was very happy to learn that because I don't have to deal with the issue of having a single row timing chain in this car right here. So I'm going to pull the valve covers off, and we're going to take a close look. You'll get to see the twin row timing chain. Sorry, I don't have a single row to show here, but once again, that's some information you can Google if you're going out and looking at a 380 SL. It's something you want to really look closely at if you're considering a 1981 to 1983 model. So here's what a twin row chain looks like. A single row chain will just be half that thickness. And a lot of people will say, what were those engineers thinking about when they installed a single row chain in a V8 engine? So a number of these engines were converted to twin row. It was a big job, an expensive job. But I would recommend that you don't avoid an 81 to 83 unless it's a dog, just forget it. But if it's a pristine car, let's say this had not been converted, and I went to look at this red 380 SL in just pristine condition, I would have purchased it with a single row chain. I wouldn't have walked away from it. It's a negotiating point, of course, but I would have purchased it, and I probably would have lived with a single row chain. I'd just change it every 20,000 miles because this isn't a car that I'm driving every day. I doubt whether I will even drive this car 20,000 miles in my lifetime. Right away, I went and checked these tubes. Just grab a hold of the oiler tube and pull on it. And you'll be surprised, some of these will just come right off. I'm going to put a link below and take you to another video of an engine that I recently did this to, and I just grabbed a hold and pulled it. The whole thing came off. And there was one engine that came into the shop here, and he was complaining about some valve noise, and I pulled the valve cover off. This tube was just laying over here on the side, so he caught it early enough, but this is a real problem right here, folks. And also down here on this upper chain guide could break and cause problems, and the chain itself, we'll talk a little bit more as we go over and look at the other side on this engine. So I'm fortunate that I have a 1983 model that already has the twin row timing chain conversion. Anytime I get one of these V8s, I open the valve covers up immediately. I don't even drive it very far until I get into this valve train and do a full inspection. And that includes this oiler tube right here. You want to grab a hold of it and see if it comes off. You can't believe how many I've seen of these that have just fallen off, and when they do, your camshaft's not going to get oiled properly. And you may even have a problem with camshaft seizure, which I've seen on at least one engine. But these clips are nice and tight. I may make a note in my later to-do list to go ahead and replace these just due to age. But these may have been replaced when they did the conversion. You can see the different color in the sprocket here. So this is probably a newer replacement, and I'm looking at these upper guides. These upper plastic guides tend to break off, and they break off and fall down into the sprocket, and they'll throw the chain, and the pistons will come up and hit the valves. And so this is why I consider this the big issue as far as reliability, because when you have any type of failure in this valve train assembly, it's big bucks, okay, real big bucks. So this is great news for me. I'm not going to do anything with the valve train. I've got a real tight chain. You can see it doesn't lift off the guide rail here. It's very tight on top of the sprocket. I'm just going to briefly show you one way you can tell whether or not the chain is loose in your own V8. You pull the left side valve cover and look inside the valve cover right in this area. This is just one of the clues you can use to determine whether or not your chain is real loose in your V8. If you see scoring right in this area where the chain has actually been rubbing on the aluminum, it's time to change this chain immediately, okay? You may even hear some rattling sounds when you start it up in the morning when it's cold. That's another real good indication, but a lot of times you can't tell just by checking timing. And unless you have a lot of experience, it's hard to tell by feel. And I just recommend you change this every 100,000 miles, regardless. If you have a car that you suspect may have a loose timing chain, you know, pull up on it. If you get a lot of lift right here in the center of the sprocket, it's time to replace it. But just don't take a chance. It's not that difficult to change these chains. It can be done without taking the engine apart. And I have full instructions in my manual on preventing catastrophic V8 failure. This was a manual I did a number of years ago that tells you all the problems you can run into with these engines if you don't pay attention to this right here. And it shows you how you can change the oiler clips. It explains how you can change those upper guide rails. And it explains in the manual how you can replace this chain yourself. It's not a beginner job, and you have to be really careful that you don't let the sprockets jump. But this is something you can do yourself. I'm looking at my 380 SL, and none of this needs to be done right now. Like I say, I may put it in my later to-do list to come back and change these upper guide rails and change these oiler clips here on the top of the cam towers just because they're plastic and they're old. So pay attention to the valve train assembly in your R107 or you can have some real headaches. I decided just for comparison that I'd come out to Crunchy here. This is my damaged 1980 450 SL, and pull the left side valve cover. And I was hoping to find some sort of damage I could show you, but that is not the case here. I was hoping to find a scored up valve cover so I could show you the problem of what happens when the chain runs loose in these engines. But look at the inside of this valve cover. There's not a mark in here. It's very obvious to me this engine has been opened up. It's showing 140,000 miles, but when you look at this and you look at particularly the chain, this engine's had some work done on it. Now to me, this chain looks brand new. And when I tug on it right at the top of the sprocket travel, it doesn't even move at all. No movement at all. So I think this chain has been replaced. I'm looking at this oiler tube and the clips. I think the clips have also been replaced because when I lift up on the oiler tube, there isn't even the slightest movement. So that's a good indication. A lot of times you'll lift up and you'll feel it move a little bit, but in this case, it's rock solid. And I'm looking at the top guide, and it also looks like it has been replaced. So old Crunchy here, it may be worth getting this engine running and just see how well it runs and maybe save the engine for another project. But if you're looking at a 107, doesn't matter what year, 350, 450, 380, 500, 560, this valve train issue is something you need to be concerned about. You need to do a full inspection, and if you need parts, if you need chains, guides, clips, everything, including instructions, I carry all of that on my website. And I'll put links in the description below this video. So I'm going to clean up these valve covers today and install new gaskets, put these back on the engine, and I can move on to the next reliability issue. My valve train inspection is complete, and fortunately I didn't have to replace any of the parts at this time. But that's not normally the case with most of these V8s. So let me tell you, this is definitely something you want to inspect. But I was really happy once again to discover that twin row timing chain conversion in this engine. And if you know, look at how nice the engine looks now. That's largely due to the fact that we polished these valve covers, and we didn't polish them with aluminum polish. You don't want them to look like chrome, you want them to look like factory. And I experimented around with a number of different chemicals to try to clean these valve covers. They all look really bad. And I did a video, it's available on my website, on how to detail aluminum parts in your engine compartment. So you can check that out. But if you do have an R107 or a C107 and you pull your valve covers and find you're in need of replacing clips, you're in need of a new chain, you're in need of chain guides down here, you need valve covers because these all leak. All that stuff is available on my website. I have kits available, I have written manuals on this, and I have video instructions on how to do all these jobs. So I can really help you with your V8 upper valve train problem. So just check all this out. I'll put links in the description below this video.